with a large, big message, if you will. Ruth, Naomi, her mother-in-law, Naomi and her husband Elimelech, they left Bethlehem and ventured into the country of Moab because there was a famine. And they went there to find sustenance. And while they were there, their two sons married two Moabites, one by the name of Orpah, the other by the name of Ruth. Again, you know the story, but let me refresh our mind a little bit, our memory. In the process of time, I don't know how much time, but in the process of time, Elimelech dies. And also the two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, die and leave their wives behind, as well as their mother, Naomi, behind. And then Naomi hears that the famine is lifted, it's over, and she's going to go back to her family, go back to her country, back to Bethlehem. And so she says to her two daughters-in-law, you stay here, you go back and stay with your people, I'm going to go home to my people. Orpah bid her goodbye and went back to her people and to her God. But Ruth said in chapters 1 and verse 16, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more so, if aught but death part thee and me. Naomi said, go back, go back. But Ruth said, no, don't tell me to leave you. I'm going to stay with you. And she did. And when she got back with her mother-in-law, Orpah stayed in Moab with her gods and her people. But Ruth stayed, clung, if you will, to Naomi. And when they got back into Bethlehem, Ruth found an opportunity to go into the wheat fields and glean in the fields, as was the custom of the day. And she found a kinsman there by the name of Boaz. And Boaz said to the elders in verse 9, I want what is Elimelech's, that which was Chilion's and Mahlon's, from the hand of Naomi. And he purchased the right to the inheritance. Now, she, with the inheritance of the land came Ruth. Boaz redeemed Ruth from in this inheritance. In verses 10 through 20, again, you've read the story, but it relates to the events that took place when Boaz redeemed the property, and with it the right to be the husband of Ruth. They bore a child, and his name was Obed. And we are told that he was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. What a tremendous story. But you see, Ruth was a Moabite. And the Moabites, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. That's what judgment said, the law said. But Boaz stepped in, and brought redemption. In Matthew chapter 1, we read verse 5, and Salmon begat Boaz of Rechab, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David the king. But Ruth, you don't belong here. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, Paul says, Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. Now, the word redeem means to buy back, to purchase back. Paul in Ephesians 2 and verse 12 speaks of us, how that we were aliens, strangers to the covenants of promise, aliens to the commonwealth of Israel. We don't belong here, not by right, not by any right of our own. We're Gentiles. Gentiles. But Paul didn't stop with verse 12 of Ephesians 2. He went on to say in verse 13 that we were redeemed, if you will. He purchased us with his own blood. Let me get that verse so I can read it just like it's recorded. Verse 12, that at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now, I'd like that, but now in Christ Jesus, ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Christ. And so we don't belong here by right, but we belong here by mercy, by redemption. He has redeemed us. He has redeemed us. In that great passage in the book of Romans chapter 11, Paul in chapters 9, 10, and 11, he deals extensively with the conditions and situation of his people Israel. And when he gets to chapter 11, he speaks about them, Israel and the Gentiles, the Jews and the Gentiles. And he speaks of how that the branches were broken off, speaking of the Jew. And thou, being a wild olive tree, the Gentile, were grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off. And thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. Paul goes on to let us know that if they abide not still in unbelief, that God is able to graft them in again. In fact, Paul goes on to tell us in verse 25 that the blindness that's come to the people of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, is only temporary. It's in part. He goes on to say in verse 26 that Israel shall be saved. So, well, you and I, we don't belong here by any natural process, if you will. We don't belong here. But we have been adopted into the family of God, redeemed by his mercies, and now we are his child because of redemption, because of his shed blood, because of his everlasting love. Thank God for mercies today. Thank God we're not under the law. Thank God we're under grace. And grace is extended to one and all. He loves you today, my friend. His mercies are extended to you, and he welcomes you into his kingdom. Kim Ballestero joins us now with her song, Joy.
drink. Ooh, here we go. I feel like singing. I feel like singing. Hey, hey, hey. I feel like dancing. Dancing, dancing. I feel like shouting. I feel the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. I feel like singing. Come on and sing. Sing for joy. I feel like dancing. I feel like dancing. I feel like shouting. Shout for joy. I feel the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. I feel like singing. Think about His goodness and all that He's done for you. I feel like shouting. I feel like shouting for the Lord tonight. I feel like singing. Come on and sing. I feel like dancing. Sing when you don't have a song. You gotta open up your mouth and sing. Come on and sing. I feel like dancing. Dance when you don't feel like shouting. He's gonna give you joy. Sing it. I feel like dancing. Let it go. Let it go. There you go. I feel the joy. I feel like singing. Come on. Get your dance on. Get your dance on. I feel the joy, 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 joy down in my heart.
We trust that you have been blessed by today's Apostolic Witness broadcast. We look forward to sharing with you again next week at the same time another exciting and informative broadcast. We would be blessed to hear from you. We welcome your letters, and you may contact us by writing to Apostolic Witness, Medora, Indiana, 47260, USA. We would like to send you some free literature along with a copy of our magazine, The Apostolic Witness. The address again is simply Apostolic Witness, Medora, Indiana, 47260, USA. Medora is spelled Medora. It is our desire to spread the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ worldwide. We would appreciate hearing from you wherever you're listening to this broadcast. Please take the time to write today. We have prayer partners join us in prayer for this broadcast and for you. We would be glad to share in any prayer request you may have. You can send them by writing again to Apostolic Witness, Medora, Indiana, 47260, USA. We would love to send you some free literature that we'd like to send you explaining this great apostolic truth. We'd also like to send you a copy of our monthly magazine called The Apostolic Witness. We look forward to receiving your letter soon in the mail. That address, one more time, is Apostolic Witness, Medora, Indiana, 47260, USA. Until this same time next week, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause His face to shine upon you. May the angel of the Lord camp about you and yours. This is Tim Gill inviting you to join us again next week at this same time for another exciting Apostolic Witness radio broadcast.